You know that moment when your whole world just crumbles right in front of your eyes? When everything you thought you knew about your family turns out to be a lie? Well, buckle up, because that's exactly what happened to me 3 weeks ago in a stuffy lawyer's office in downtown Chicago. My name's Sarah, and I'm about to tell you the most insane story about betrayal, family secrets, and the sweetest revenge you've ever heard. Picture this. I'm sitting there in this fancy mahogany-paneled room, tears streaming down my face, while my stepmother Victoria, yeah, that's her real name, and trust me, it fits her perfectly, is literally gloating over my father's casket, like she just won the lottery. This woman had the audacity to tell me, right there at his funeral, that I'd never see a single penny of his money. Can you believe that? I never thought I'd be burying my dad at 28. Hell, I figured the old man would outlive us all. He was stubborn as a mule and twice as tough. But there I was, standing in Graceland Cemetery on that freezing February morning, watching them lower the only parent I'd ever really known into the ground. Dad had been sick for months, but he kept it from me. Typical Robert Mitchell behavior. Never wanted to worry anyone, especially not his little princess, as he used to call me. I found out about the cancer from Victoria. Of course, after it was too late to do anything about it. Victoria. God, where do I even start with this woman? She waltzed into our lives when I was 16, all blonde hair and fake smiles, claiming she was head over heels for my dad. Looking back now, I can see she was eyeing his bank account more than his heart, but I was just a kid dealing with losing my mom 5 years earlier. I wanted Dad to be happy, you know? The funeral was small. Dad never was one for big crowds. Just me, Victoria, a handful of Dad's old business partners, and Mrs. Henderson from next door who'd been bringing us casseroles since I was 12. Victoria played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing her eyes with this expensive little handkerchief, accepting condolences like she was Jackie Kennedy or something. But the real show started after everyone left. "Well, Sarah," she said, her voice suddenly losing all that fake sweetness, "I suppose you'll be wanting to talk about your father's affairs." I was confused. "What do you mean?" She actually laughed. Not a nice laugh either. One of those cold, calculated ones that sends chills down your spine. "Oh, honey, you really think he left you anything? You've been nothing but a burden to him for years, always asking for money for college, for your little apartment, for that beat-up Honda of yours. He was tired of it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That's not true. Dad loved me. He said a lot of things." Victoria cut me off, adjusting her pearl necklace. "But actions speak louder than words, don't they? He married me, not you. He chose me to be his wife, his partner, his heir. You think he'd give you a penny when he has a real family now? Real family." Those words hit me like a freight train. Victoria had 2 kids from her previous marriage, Madison and Blake, and they'd always treated me like I was some kind of intruder in my own home. Now, apparently, so had my own father. "The reading is tomorrow at 10, she continued, already walking toward her brand new Mercedes, the one Dad had bought her for Christmas. "But don't bother showing up. Mr. Garrison will just be confirming what I already know. Robert left everything to me and the kids. Everything." I stood there in that cemetery for another hour, just staring at Dad's headstone. Robert James Mitchell, beloved husband and father. Not even my name on there, just beloved husband to a woman who'd married him for his money, and father to kids who weren't even his. That night, I called my best friend Jessica, crying so hard I could barely get the words out. "Sarah, you gotta go to that reading," she said. "You're his daughter, his only daughter. There's no way he'd cut you out completely. You didn't see her face, Jess. She was so confident, so smug, like she already knew exactly what was in that will. Then prove her wrong. Show up tomorrow and fight for what's yours." So that's exactly what I did. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying Sarah's story so far, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to follow the channel. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out. The reading of the will is coming up next, and let me tell you, Victoria is in for the shock of her life. The law office of Garrison, Walsh & Associates looked like something out of a movie, all dark wood and leather-bound books, with that musty smell that screams, old money. I'd been there once before with Dad when I turned 18, something about updating some paperwork. Never thought I'd be back under these circumstances. Victoria was already there when I walked in, looking like she owned the place in her designer black suit and those ridiculous oversized sunglasses. Madison and Blake flanked her like bodyguards, both of them staring at their phones and acting like I didn't exist. Nothing new there. I thought I told you not to bother coming, Victoria said, without even looking up from her manicure. It's a free country, I replied, taking a seat across from them. My hands were shaking, but I tried to keep my voice steady. Mr. Garrison walked in a few minutes later, this elderly gentleman with kind eyes and a warm smile. He'd been Dad's lawyer for over 20 years, and I remembered him being genuinely fond of our family back in the day. Sarah, dear, he said, giving me a gentle hug. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man. Victoria cleared her throat loudly. Can we please get this over with? I have a spa appointment at 2. Even Blake looked embarrassed by that one. Kid was only 19, but at least he had some sense of decency left in him. Mr. Garrison settled behind his massive desk and pulled out a thick folder. Of course. We're here for the reading of Robert James Mitchell's last will and testament dated October 15th, 2023. He looked around the room. Are all parties present? Everyone who matters, Victoria said with a smirk in my direction. I wanted to punch her right then and there, but Mr. Garrison was already opening the document. I'll start with the smaller bequests, he said, adjusting his reading glasses. To Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor and friend, I leave the sum of $10,000 in my collection of vintage records. Victoria rolled her eyes. How generous, she muttered sarcastically. To Madison Wells, I leave the sum of $50,000 for her college education, with the stipulation that it be used solely for academic purposes. Madison actually looked up from her phone for that one. Wait, what? He's giving me money? To Blake Wells, I leave the sum of $50,000 for his college education, with the same stipulations. Blake just stared at Mr. Garrison like he'd grown a second head. These kids had always assumed they'd inherit everything just because their mom had married into it. Now, Mr. Garrison continued, for the major bequests. Victoria sat up straighter, that triumphant smile spreading across her face. This was her moment, her big win. To my beloved wife Victoria, I leave the house on Maple Street, along with its contents, and the sum of $200,000. $200,000? Victoria's smile faltered slightly. That's it? Mr. Garrison wasn't finished. The remainder of my estate, including my business interests, investment portfolio, savings accounts, and all other assets, I leave to my daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, whom I love more than life itself. The room went completely silent. Like, dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that expensive carpet. Victoria's face went from confusion to shock to pure rage in about 3 seconds flat. What? She shrieked, jumping up from her chair. That's impossible. He promised me everything. We talked about this. Ma'am, please sit down, Mr. Garrison said calmly. No, I will not sit down. This is wrong. Sarah doesn't deserve anything. She's been nothing but a drain on this family. Madison and Blake were just staring at their mom, like they'd never seen her before. Which, honestly, they probably hadn't. At least not the real her. There must be some mistake, Victoria continued, her voice getting higher and more hysterical. Robert would never. He couldn't. How much is the remainder? Mr. Garrison looked uncomfortable, but he answered anyway. Approximately $3.2 million. I thought Victoria was going to pass out right there. Hell, I thought I was going to pass out. $3.2 million? Dad had that kind of money? This is fraud, Victoria screamed. That little brat manipulated him. She probably wrote this will herself. Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Garrison said firmly, this will is perfectly legal and was witnessed by 2 independent parties. Your husband was of sound mind when he dictated these terms to me personally. That's when Victoria turned on me with pure venom in her eyes. You think you've won something here? You think Daddy's money is going to fix your pathetic little life? You're nothing, Sarah. You've always been nothing, and money won't change that. But I barely heard her. I was thinking about something else entirely. Something Dad had said to me about 6 months ago when I'd come over for Sunday dinner. Sarah, he'd said, I want you to know that no matter what happens, you're my real legacy. Not the money, not the business. You. You're everything your mother was and more. I'd thought he was just being sentimental. Turns out he was trying to tell me something. The rest of that meeting was a blur of Victoria screaming about contesting the will, and Mr. Garrison patiently explaining why that would be a waste of her time and money. Madison and Blake just sat there looking shell-shocked, while their mom had what can only be described as a complete meltdown. This isn't over, Victoria hissed at me as we left the office. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. You'll spend every penny of that money on lawyers before you see a dime of it. But I wasn't really listening to her threats. I was thinking about Dad, about all those times in the last few months when he'd seemed like he wanted to tell me something but held back. All those mysterious phone calls he'd take in his study. The way he'd look at Victoria sometimes when he thought nobody was watching. Not with love, but with something that looked almost like disgust. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. Finally, around 2 a.m, I decided to drive over to Dad's house. Well, Victoria's house now, I guess. The place was dark, except for one light in Dad's study. I still had my key, so I let myself in quietly. I knew Victoria would be passed out by now. She'd been hitting the wine pretty hard lately, especially since Dad got sick. His study looked exactly the same as it always had. Leather chair, mahogany desk, walls lined with books he actually read, unlike Victoria's decorative ones in the living room. But something felt different. It took me a minute to realize what it was. The picture of Victoria that usually sat on his desk was gone. In its place was an old photo of me and him from when I was about 10, fishing at Lake Michigan. I remembered that day perfectly. It was just the two of us, and he'd taught me how to bait my own hook even though I was scared of the worms. I sat down in his chair and just breathed for a minute. That's when I noticed the envelope tucked under his desk blotter with my name written on it in Dad's handwriting. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "If you're reading this, then you've already been to see Harold Garrison, and you know about the will. I imagine Victoria didn't take it well." I laughed despite myself. That was such a Dad thing to say, understated to the point of being almost funny. "There are things I need to tell you, things I should have told you months ago. I've made mistakes, Sarah, terrible mistakes, and I'm afraid I've put both of us in danger by waiting so long to fix them." Danger? What was he talking about? Victoria isn't the woman I thought I married. Hell, she isn't even the woman she pretended to be. Her real name isn't Victoria Wells. It's Vanessa Kellerman, and she's been married 4 times before me. Each of her previous husbands died under suspicious circumstances, and each time, she inherited everything. My blood went cold. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of sick joke. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when I started getting suspicious about some inconsistencies in her stories. What he found, Jesus, Sarah, what he found scared me to death. Literally. I think she's been poisoning me. The letter shook in my hands. Poisoning him? My dad thought Victoria had been trying to kill him. The symptoms started about a year ago. Fatigue, nausea, confusion. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. They ran every test in the book, but they were looking for diseases, not murder. It wasn't until I found the bottle hidden in her makeup case that I understood. Antifreeze, Sarah. She's been putting antifreeze in my coffee every morning for months. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. This was insane. This was impossible. People didn't actually do things like this in real life, did they? When I came back to the desk, there was more. I confronted her about it last week. Showed her the bottle, told her I knew what she was doing. She didn't even try to deny it, just smiled and said I could never prove it, that she'd been very careful. She said if I tried to turn her in, she'd disappear with everything I owned, and I'd never see her again. She seemed to think that would be worse than dying. She was wrong. I've already changed the will, obviously, but that's not enough. I've documented everything. The private investigator's report, photos of the bottle, even secretly recorded one of our conversations where she basically confesses. It's all in the safe behind the painting of your mother. The combination is your birthday. Month, day, year. My birthday. Of course it was. Sarah, I'm dying. The damage is already too extensive to reverse, and frankly, I'm tired of fighting. But I want you to have the tools you need to make sure Victoria never hurts anyone else the way she's hurt me. She's going to be furious when she finds out about the will, and desperate people do desperate things. Be careful, sweetheart. Be smarter than your old man was. And remember, I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I sat there for a long time, just holding that letter and crying. My father was gone, murdered by the woman he'd trusted with his life, and she'd been living in this house, sleeping in his bed, playing the grieving widow while knowing exactly what she'd done. But the worst part? I was pretty sure she wasn't done yet. I found the safe exactly where Dad said it would be, hidden behind Mom's portrait in his study. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely work the combination lock, but eventually it clicked open to reveal a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. The private investigator's report was like something out of a crime novel. Victoria, or Vanessa, I guess I should call her now, had a pattern. She'd find wealthy, lonely men, usually widowers, charm them into marriage within months, then slowly poison them while playing the devoted wife. She'd done it in Phoenix, Denver, Nashville, and Atlanta before landing in Chicago and setting her sights on Dad. The photos made me sick to my stomach. Pictures of the antifreeze bottle hidden in her makeup case, close-ups of the label, even receipts showing she'd been buying the stuff regularly for months. There was also a digital recording device with several audio files. I plugged it into Dad's computer and hit play on the first file. It was dated just 10 days before he died. "You can't prove anything, Robert." Victoria's voice came through crystal clear. "And even if you could, who would believe you? A sick old man making wild accusations against his loving wife? I know what you are." Dad's voice, weaker than I remembered but still defiant. "I know about Phoenix, about Denver, about all of them." "Oh, you know about my husband's? How fascinating. Tell me, did your little detective friend also tell you how wealthy I am now? How comfortable my life has become? You're a murderer." She actually laughed. "I'm a survivor, darling. And you, well, you're not going to be around much longer to worry about it, are you?" I had to stop the recording. Hearing her admit it so casually, so coldly, it was like listening to a monster. But there were more files, and I knew I had to hear them all. The next one was even worse. Victoria talking about how she'd researched Dad for months before approaching him, how she'd learned about Mom's death and my struggles in college to make herself seem like the perfect replacement family. She'd calculated everything, even down to bringing Madison and Blake into the picture, to make Dad feel like he was getting the big family he'd always wanted. "The beautiful thing about antifreeze," she said in one recording, "is that the symptoms mimic so many other conditions. The doctors run themselves in circles trying to figure out what's wrong while the patient just gets sicker and sicker. Very humane, really. Humane." She called slowly poisoning my father humane. By the time I finished listening to all the recordings, it was almost dawn. I sat there in Dad's chair, surrounded by evidence of the most evil thing I'd ever encountered, and tried to figure out what to do next. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Victoria was smart, and she'd had time to destroy any physical evidence. The recordings were damning, but she could claim they were fake or taken out of context. I needed more. That's when I remembered something else from Dad's letter. He'd said Victoria would be desperate after finding out about the will, and desperate people do desperate things. What if she tried to come after me next? What if she decided the easiest way to get Dad's money was to eliminate the only person standing between her and it? The thought should have terrified me, but instead, it gave me an idea. A dangerous, possibly stupid idea, but an idea nonetheless. What if I let her try? I spent the rest of the morning researching private security companies and legal requirements for recording conversations in Illinois. By noon, I had a plan. It wasn't a great plan, and it definitely wasn't a safe plan, but it was the only way I could think of to get the evidence I needed to put Victoria away for good. First, I called Jessica. "Sarah, thank God, I've been worried sick about you. How did the will reading go?" "Jess, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to believe me." I told her everything. About the will, about Dad's letter, about the recordings. To her credit, she listened without interrupting, though I could practically hear her jaw dropping through the phone. "Holy shit, Sarah. Holy actual shit. You need to call the cops right now." "I can't. Not yet. I need more evidence." "What kind of more evidence? You literally have recordings of her confessing to murder." "She's smart, Jess. She'll find a way out of this if I don't do it right. But I have an idea." I told her my plan. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell," Jessica said finally, "that is the stupidest, most dangerous thing I have ever heard in my entire life. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you. What do you need me to do?" That afternoon, I went shopping. Body cameras, digital recording devices, a new cell phone with GPS tracking that I could share with Jessica. If Victoria was going to try something, I wanted to be ready. I also made an appointment to see Mr. Garrison first thing Monday morning. If something happened to me, I wanted to make sure someone knew exactly why. By Sunday evening, I was as prepared as I could be. All I had to do now was wait for Victoria to make her move. I didn't have to wait long. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on Sunday. I was lying in bed in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd completely lost my mind, when my phone rang. "Sarah?" Victoria's voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about what happened at the lawyer's office, and I owe you an apology." This was it. The performance was starting. Victoria, No, please let me talk. I was horrible to you. Grief makes people say terrible things, and I said things I didn't mean. Your father loved you so much, and he would be ashamed of how I treated you. She was good. I had to give her that. If I hadn't heard those recordings, I might have actually believed her. I understand if you can't forgive me, she continued, but I was hoping we could meet somewhere tomorrow and talk. Maybe we could find a way to work together instead of fighting each other. Robert wouldn't have wanted his death to tear his family apart. Family. Right. I don't know, Victoria. You really hurt me. I know I did, and I want to make it right. Please, Sarah, let me at least try. We agreed to meet for coffee at a little place called Rosie's Diner on the outskirts of town. It was perfect for my purposes, public enough that she couldn't try anything too obvious, but quiet enough that we could have a private conversation. I spent Monday morning getting wired up like I was going undercover for the FBI. Body camera hidden in my jacket, digital recorder in my purse, GPS tracker on my phone, and Jessica monitoring everything from her apartment. If this went wrong, at least there would be evidence. Victoria was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and looking like the picture of grief-stricken respectability. She'd dressed down, jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer outfits, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable. Sarah, thank you for coming, she said, standing up to give me a hug. I wasn't sure you would. The hug lasted a few seconds too long, and I felt her hand brush against my purse. When she pulled away, she had this weird little smile on her face that disappeared so quickly, I almost thought I'd imagined it. I ordered you coffee, she said. Just how you like it, black with 2 sugars. I hadn't told her how I liked my coffee. We'd never had coffee together, not once in all the years she'd been married to Dad. But she knew anyway, which meant she'd been watching me, studying me. The coffee was already getting cold when I sat down. Victoria had been here for a while. I've been doing a lot of thinking since Friday, she said, wrapping her hands around her own mug. About Robert, about us, about the future, and I realized something important. What's that? We need each other. You have his money, but I have his house, his memories, his things. Neither of us has the whole picture of who he was. We could share that if we wanted to. She was playing this perfectly. The grieving stepmother reaching out to her husband's daughter, trying to bridge the gap between them. If I were recording this for evidence, it would just sound like a normal family conversation, except for the coffee. I picked up the mug and pretended to take a sip, but I didn't swallow. The taste was wrong, bitter in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee itself. I discreetly spit it back into the mug, while Victoria was looking out the window. You know, I said, Dad used to talk about you a lot toward the end. Victoria's attention snapped back to me. He did? Oh yeah. He had a lot of stories about your life before you met him. Very interesting stories. Something flickered behind her eyes. What kind of stories? Stories about Phoenix, about Denver, about all the husbands who came before him. Victoria went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do, Vanessa. The mask slipped for just a second, and I saw the real woman underneath. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Then she smiled that practiced smile again. I think you must be confused, dear. Grief can play tricks on the mind. Can it? Because I have recordings that say otherwise. Hours of recordings, actually, of you confessing to exactly what you did to my father. Victoria's hand tightened around her coffee mug. That's impossible. Is it? He was smarter than you gave him credit for. He figured out what you were doing months ago. He documented everything. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across that little table in Rosie's Diner. The grieving stepmother facade was completely gone now. What was left was the woman who'd murdered my father, and God knows how many other men. Even if that were true, she said finally, it wouldn't matter. Dead men tell no tales, Sarah, and neither do dead daughters. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Accidents happen all the time. Young women drink too much, take too many pills, drive too fast on dark roads. Very sad, but these things happen. She glanced meaningfully at my untouched coffee cup, especially to women who stick their noses where they don't belong. That's when I knew I had her. She'd just confessed to planning my murder, and every word of it was being recorded, but I wasn't done yet. You know what I find interesting about antifreeze poisoning? I said, leaning back in my booth. It's the symptoms. Starts out feeling like you have the flu, nausea, fatigue, confusion. Then it gets worse. Much worse. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that you're not as smart as you think you are. See, Dad didn't just record your conversations. He also had you followed. He documented every purchase you made, every move you made, every lie you told. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos Dad had saved. This is you at Home Depot on September 15th, buying a gallon of antifreeze. And here you are again on October 3rd, buying another one. Strange purchases for someone who doesn't do their own car maintenance, don't you think? Victoria glanced around the diner nervously. There were only a few other customers, an elderly couple sharing pie and a trucker reading a newspaper. But she seemed to realize we weren't as alone as she'd hoped. You're making a mistake, Sarah, she said quietly. A very dangerous mistake. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the one who made the mistake. You got greedy. You couldn't just take the house and the $200,000 and disappear. You had to try for everything. That money is mine, Victoria hissed, her composure finally cracking. I earned every penny of it. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to a sick old man? Pretending to love him, pretending to care about his boring stories and his pathetic daughter. There it was, the real Victoria, in all her disgusting glory. And before him, it was Henry in Atlanta. Poor Henry with his heart condition that got mysteriously worse right after your wedding. And before that, it was Michael in Nashville. Terrible accident, that one. Fell down the stairs in his own home. Victoria's face had gone pale. How do you? I told you. Dad hired a very good private investigator. We know about all of them, Victoria. James in Denver, Charles in Phoenix. 5 men, dead because they had the misfortune of falling for your act. You can't prove any of that, can I? Because I think when the police start looking into those deaths with fresh eyes, they're going to find a lot of interesting coincidences. Amazing how many wealthy widowers have fatal accidents right after marrying mysterious women who then disappear with their money. Victoria stood up abruptly. I think this conversation is over. Sit down, Victoria. Something in my voice made her pause. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't scared anymore. Maybe it was the realization that I knew exactly who and what she was. You see, there's something you don't understand about me, I continued. I'm not Dad. I'm not some lonely, trusting man you can manipulate and murder. I'm his daughter, and I inherited more than just his money. I inherited his intelligence, his stubbornness, his absolute refusal to let evil people win. You poisoned my father for months. You tortured him, made him suffer, and then you stood at his funeral and pretended to grieve. You looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing, that I didn't deserve his love or his legacy. Victoria sat back down, but she was tense, ready to run. But here's the thing about playing the long game, Victoria. Sometimes the person you're playing against is better at it than you are. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder, setting it on the table between us. This entire conversation has been recorded. Every threat you've made, every confession you've given, every single word. And it's not just on this device. It's being live-streamed to a secure server that my friend Jessica is monitoring from her apartment across town. Victoria's eyes went wide with panic. Oh, and in case you're thinking about trying to grab the recorder or hurt me in some way, you should know that there are 2 off-duty police officers having lunch at the counter behind you. They're friends of Dad's, and they've been very interested to hear about his mysterious illness. I was lying about the cops, but Victoria didn't need to know that. She glanced over her shoulder anyway, and I saw her realize that she was trapped. What do you want? She asked finally. I want justice for my father. I want justice for Henry and Michael and James and Charles and whoever else you've killed, and I want to make sure you never hurt anyone ever again. Victoria looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her options. Run and hope she could disappear before the police caught up with her. Try to discredit me somehow. Attempt to complete whatever plan she'd had for the poisoned coffee. But she was a predator who'd always relied on her victims' trust and naivety. She didn't know how to handle someone who saw her clearly and wasn't afraid. You think you're so smart, she said finally, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never been caught. What makes you think some spoiled little daddy's girl can succeed where the police have failed? Because I'm not trying to catch a stranger, Victoria. I'm trying to catch the woman who murdered my father, and I don't have to follow police protocol or worry about constitutional rights. I just have to be smarter than you, and patient enough to let you hang yourself with your own rope. Victoria's phone rang, breaking the tense silence between us. She glanced at the screen and her face went white. Detective Morrison? She answered, her voice shaky. Yes, this is Victoria Mitchell. What? I don't understand. No, I'm not at home right now. She hung up and stared at me with pure hatred. Very clever, she said. Having the police search my house while you keep me busy here. Actually, that hadn't been part of my plan, but I wasn't about to tell her that. They won't find anything, she continued, but there was doubt in her voice now. I'm too careful for that. Are you? Because I'm betting you kept souvenirs. Killers like you always do. A piece of jewelry from Henry, maybe? A watch from Michael? Something to help you remember your conquests. Victoria's hand went instinctively to the gold locket around her neck. A locket I'd never seen her wear before Dad's funeral. That's not yours, I said quietly. Whose is it, Victoria? Which victim did you steal that from? She clutched the locket protectively. You don't know what you're talking about. Open it. No. Open it, or I'll call those officers over here to do it for you. With trembling fingers, Victoria opened the locket. Inside was a small photo of a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. James's first wife, she whispered. From Denver. She died in a car accident 10 years before I met him, and he used to show me her picture and tell me stories about her. And you took it when he died. I don't know why. It was stupid keeping it. No, Victoria. It wasn't stupid. It was evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Police are at her house. They found a whole jewelry box full of stuff that doesn't belong to her. Also a notebook with names, dates, and bank account numbers. You got her. I showed Victoria the text. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. It's over, I said simply. You have no idea what you've done, Victoria said, but the fight had gone out of her voice. There are people who won't be happy about this. People who helped me, who made money from my activities. What people? You think I figured all this out by myself? The poison, the timing, the legal paperwork? I had help, Sarah. Professional help. And they don't like loose ends. A chill ran down my spine. This was bigger than just Victoria. Who, Victoria? Who helped you? But before she could answer, the diner door opened and Detective Morrison walked in with 2 uniformed officers. He was a tall, serious-looking man in his 50s with kind eyes that reminded me of Dad. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, approaching our table. I'm Detective Morrison. We spoke on the phone. I need you to come with me. Victoria looked at me one last time. This isn't over, Sarah. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. As they led her away in handcuffs, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. Relief that justice was finally coming for Dad, but unease about Victoria's parting words. What had she meant about people who helped her? Detective Morrison returned a few minutes later and sat down across from me. Miss Mitchell, I understand you're the one who provided the evidence against your stepmother. Yes, sir. My father documented everything before he died. He knew what she was doing. We found quite a collection at the house. Jewelry, personal items, even what appears to be a kill list with names and bank account information. We're going to need you to come down to the station and give a full statement. Of course. Whatever you need. There's something else, Detective Morrison said, lowering his voice. Your stepmother mentioned something about people who helped her. Do you know anything about that? I told him about Victoria's warning, and I watched his expression grow more serious. Miss Mitchell, I want you to be very careful for the next few weeks. If there really is some kind of organization behind this, they might see you as a threat. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay? I thought about my tiny apartment with its flimsy locks and single exit. I'll figure something out. We can arrange police protection if necessary. I need to think about it. That night, I sat in Jessica's apartment, surrounded by all the evidence that had brought Victoria down. The recordings, the photographs, the private investigator's report. But instead of feeling victorious, I felt scared. What if Victoria was right? What if this was bigger than just one sick woman killing lonely men? What if I just painted a target on my back? You did the right thing, Sarah, Jessica said, bringing me a cup of tea. Your dad would be so proud of you. I know, it's just, what if she wasn't working alone? What if there are more people like her out there? Then the police will catch them too. You gave them everything they need to investigate. I hoped she was right. But as I lay awake that night on Jessica's couch, I couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's arrest was just the beginning of something much bigger and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Mr. Garrison's office again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The money had been transferred to my accounts. Victoria was in jail awaiting trial, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. Your father would be very proud of you, Mr. Garrison said, signing the last of the paperwork. What you did took tremendous courage. I just did what he taught me to do. Never let the bad guys win. Well, you certainly succeeded in that regard. Have you decided what you're going to do with the inheritance? I'd been thinking about that a lot. $3.2 million was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having, but it came with a heavy price. Every penny was tainted with Dad's blood, with Victoria's crimes. I want to start a foundation, I said. Something to help victims of domestic violence and fraud. Dad always said money was only useful if you used it to help people. Mr. Garrison smiled. He'd like that very much. As I walked out of his office, I felt my phone buzz with a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your victory. But remember, some games have multiple rounds. A friend. My blood went cold. Victoria had been right about having help, and apparently her friends weren't happy about her arrest. But you know what? I wasn't the same scared girl who'd sat in that cemetery 3 weeks ago, believing I was all alone in the world. I was Robert Mitchell's daughter, and I'd just taken down a serial killer with nothing but my wits and my determination. If Victoria's accomplices wanted to come after me, let them try. I'd beaten one monster already, and I wasn't afraid of fighting another. Besides, I had 3.2 million reasons to make sure justice was served. I walked to my car, not the beat-up Honda anymore, but a sensible sedan with good safety ratings and a GPS tracker Jessica insisted I install, and drove toward my new life. A life where Dad's legacy would mean something positive, where his death wouldn't be in vain. As I drove through downtown Chicago, I passed the cemetery where he was buried. I pulled over and walked to his grave, where someone had left fresh flowers. "Hey, Dad," I said, kneeling beside his headstone. "We got her. Victoria's going to spend the rest of her life in prison, and the police are investigating all her other victims. You can rest now." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the old oak tree nearby, and for just a moment, I could swear I felt him there with me. "I love you too, Dad, and I promise I'm going to make sure your money does some good in this world." Victoria thought she could destroy our family, but she was wrong. She just made us stronger. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this. The FBI just arrested 3 people in connection with Victoria's case. Apparently, there was this whole network of people who helped women target wealthy men. They called it the Widows Club." The Widows Club? Yeah, sick, right? They had lawyers who helped forge documents, investigators who did background checks on potential victims, even a chemist who provided untraceable poisons. Victoria was just one of their, what did they call them? Field agents. I thought about that threatening text and realized it might have been one last desperate attempt to scare me. If the FBI had arrested the whole network, then Victoria's friends weren't coming for me after all. "It's really over," I whispered. "It's really over. You did it, Sarah. You didn't just get justice for your dad. You probably saved dozens of other men from becoming victims." That night, I sat in my apartment, my new apartment, in a safe building with good security, and raised a glass of Dad's favorite whiskey in his honor. "To Robert Mitchell," I said to the empty room, "who taught his daughter that sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the truth comes to light." Outside my window, Chicago glittered with possibility. Tomorrow, I'd start working on the foundation. I'd use Dad's money to help other people who'd been victimized by predators like Victoria. I'd make sure his death meant something. But tonight, I was just going to sit here and remember the man who'd loved me enough to protect me even from beyond the grave. The man who'd made sure that when Victoria said he'd never give you a penny, she was dead wrong, because he'd given me everything. Not just the money, but the tools I needed to fight back, and the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever known. Victoria had underestimated Robert Mitchell's daughter once. It was a mistake she'd never make again. And that's the end of Sarah's incredible story. If you made it this far, you know how this brave woman turned her grief into justice and her father's murder into a mission to help others. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this wild ride. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Victoria's downfall, and don't forget to follow the channel for more amazing true stories. Sarah's courage in the face of evil is truly inspiring, and I hope her story reminds all of us that sometimes the good guys really do win in the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.